Okay, I want to talk about spiritual abuses and how it's a bit unfair when you're doing your, I mean, it's 101, textbook 101. When you're analyzing for schizophrenia, you have to ask about any cultural influences or religious influences that could be giving you these ideas, because that's, if it's backed by another group's theology, that can't be deemed crazy for an individual. Okay, but you guys never ask me why I believed what I believed or where that came from. What has become a lot more clear to me now is that I've gone through a lot of spiritual abuse. Um, Coming in as a child, I was naturally really spiritually inclined, um, but I think it was abusive, told that I was stupid, and that belief was stupid and weak, and you shouldn't be like faith a faith person because then you suck. And so I was really shamed away from a lot of exploration, that was not nurtured, but the drive was always there. And for me, being a little kid, I just kind of like made up my own thing and didn't had it was like covert spirituality on my part. I had to read in secret. I had to go practice, blessings in the backyard in secret. And I told you I kind of went through all these layers of like spiritual unfolding. Yeah, I basically felt shamed, and also I felt it from my friends. Now, that might be organic. I did tend to gravitate towards, atheists, and I did tend to gravitate towards, not all of them, towards people that were skeptics. But it also could be that people are playing that role to keep me from going towards communities that might kind of tell me that some of the things that your family is doing are satanic. See, I wouldn't get how unusual that was without the opposite presenting that that's not normal. To me, it's normal because it's all I've ever known. So when people are like this and this, but what you never stop to ask me is how I came to the beliefs that I did, and it's kind of really important. So some things you need to know about me. I'm always intensely spiritually curious, though very shamed into atheism. And I agreed with atheism. I came to also agree with atheism. And then found that existentialism was more appropriate. And then told you agnosticism, all this. Now, some of the spiritual abuses that led to the oddities, the spiritual oddities that you're seeing, um, witchcraft was not necessarily hugely glorified in my household. I don't want to mislead you into, but it also was in no way shamed. It was a safe spirituality for me to practice. My father bought me witchcraft tools when I was like 12. And now I kind of see maybe this is playing into some other things I didn't realize, but he's the one who got me everything. He got me books. He kind of like just was like, okay, here, you do this now. And that was safe. That wasn't something that was mocked. Um, I lit a few candles with my father and in prayer for certain things, more manifesting than prayer because God was distinctly not involved. And then when I kept playing on my own years later, right before you found me, I was um, really entrenched in just, I had really gotten spiritually involved. Became one of the most important aspects of my life. Definitely. I was daily partaking in craft. I mean, you can call it witchcraft. I hate to say that title because I think it's raises hairs, but things like blessings or clearing out energies from my room, or doing a prayer for me, or doing a prayer for another, or doing a petition to God. But the difference was I was incorporating God into it. There was not one, I mean, unless I forgot, there was not one prayer that wasn't also handed over to God at the end of me going, and if I'm wrong, save me from my own ego, by the way. And I still do it this way. Um, And that was the covert part because I wasn't allowed to do that. But so when you look at past lives and stuff, where did that start? It started in the household. It wasn't a huge talk. In fact, I don't know that my father was ever personally sold on it. I asked him numerous times, but he did do regressions, and I was taken to people who did regret by my father, who did regressions for me, and I then took that on myself as well to go into a hypnosis institute and take some free classes on it, and I have to say it was really fucking interesting, of the things that came up. But also, it should be said that when you smoke weed, you're more susceptible to these things. It's just fact. Like, if you watch Who Can Get Hypnotized, Who Can't, the stoned one is always the first one to get hypnotized, and I would go in notoriously stoned. So, like, also that, I can't discount that. There were very few times I was hypnotized when I wasn't stoned on marijuana. Like, oh, yeah. But I don't mean to discount it, but, like, also that. And so when you, like, how could you believe in multiple lives? Well, it's not that weird. There's huge populations of the world that believe in multiple lives that claim to do what I was saying. And now at this point, I just don't know. I feel incredibly disheartened by all of it because I think that without a shadow of a doubt, I watched friends sabotage me with that and pretend to believe in things that they didn't to get cameras for it. And I would be like, oh, wow, okay. And I wouldn't necessarily always believe them, but I was like, okay, who am I to negate any of this? That's true for you. And I was a very open-minded person. So there's that, is kind of, that became abusive, spiritual abuse. But then in the very start of Star Wars, this was most unfortunate because, quite frankly, I had a nervous breakdown several times in the beginning of Star Wars. But I don't think that's abnormal psychology. I think anybody would, given the circumstances. And I really mean that statement. You don't know what it was like. I went from having relationships in my life for 20 years that I could trust. I thought I could trust. I went around feeling not scared of life or people, maybe a little, but not really, and very open to adventure. That's how I lived my life all up until Star Wars was choose your own adventure today. And just with an openness to my own life adventure and a willingness to discover the serendipity in God. And then the mistake, because I had no spiritual guidance that I made, is I was such a spiritual person, such an open-minded person, that I would just be like, okay, God, show me the thing today. And when people would present information or people would present spiritual viewpoints, I'd be like, oh, wow, that's God speaking. And it's like, and I would be like, it's serendipity, because some things were so uncanny and coincidental that I'd be like, it's got to be God, because how could it be a coincidence? Not yet realizing that it's all systematically set up, and that a lot of these people that are coming in with God's information are actually false prophets who work for a satanic cult. And so I did get derailed many times, admittedly, but having such an openness and a need for God that I'd be like, wow, like it's basically in desperation as well, of being like, okay, and so it is. And when Star Wars hit me, I went from having, so when you look at psychology, normal psychology and abnormal psychology, you need, as a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist, as a sociologist, I can tell you that there are two factors that most affect you sociologically that are predictive of any person, any normal person having a breakdown. And these breakdowns can even lead to death. It can be that severe. And I went through that formula. I still go through it. I still go through it, but very, very hard, very, very suddenly. And that I went from having a very structured life to having a anime. It's just a very unstructured life, and just nothing, no structure. All of a sudden, that was ripped from me. I worked all the time, and I would like have every day planned of the week, and then this day I'll hang out with my friends, and then this day I will work, and then this I will work on this, and it was all always very planned. And then all of a sudden it went to, you have no plans, everything is, you don't know anything anymore, and now you're thrust into this game of Star Wars, and fucking you don't even know the rules. And so I felt like I can't even make plans because everything is thwarted, and because I don't understand the rules of the game of which I'm asked to survive. That's the hardest part of Star Wars. I don't get the rules. No one has, keep in mind, not once have the rules been explained to me. I don't get what's going on. That's not fair. And the other thing is that, all I know is that I can't get violent. That's all I know of the rules, is I can't get violent or I'll get locked up, most severely off very little. That's all I know. And so that's why I hold my tongue everywhere, and I told, I take so much shit like a little bitch, is because I think that's the rules. And that's not helped me at all. That has hurt me hugely to be like that. And even been used against me. It's fucking ridiculous. I can't win no matter what I do. So, in the beginning, I was also, the other thing is, so isolation is the other part. Dysregulation of schedule, not having a schedule, and isolation are the two biggest factors, sociologically speaking, for nervous breakdown. I had both those in an instant. All my stuff was ripped away. All my social networks I couldn't use anymore, or were against me, or I was, they were freaked out by the situation, or whatever it was, or I was skeptical of them, whatever it was. I didn't trust anybody in an instant, didn't want the people I did trust to get involved, had everything taken away. It's too much pressure for the human psyche. And on top of that, and this was the hardest factor, Star Wars started. And that one fucked my shit up. That factor was the worst out of the three. To suddenly have so much attention under such dire circumstances, and I will say it again, I will say it again, I will always say it. The worst part of Star Wars is that you suffer and the entire world knows it and does nothing. That is the absolute worst psychological fuckery of Star Wars, and I've gone through a lot. And that over and over and over, I have to say, is the one that fucks up my shit on the daily for 6 years. It doesn't ever stop. It's just this complete, imagine, there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere it's going to get better. There's nowhere. There's nothing. You're totally trapped. That's what it feels like. You're totally helpless. And this is always, and it's just, wow, it's too much. And I had a tremendous amount of vulnerability and breakdown. So I'm prefacing all this to say that right when Star Wars happened, what simultaneously happened is, now the enemy knows that they have to hook into you some way. They can't hook into you where you can't participate. So what they did, knowing I wasn't going to take their bribe, knowing that I didn't care about their worldly thing, knowing that their men weren't lusting me off, well, sometimes, but mostly not. Mostly I got over that pretty quickly. And that I wasn't going to do their drugs, and all the hooks that they were going to offer, all the worldly things, weren't it. And knowing me, what they did, knowing that I was too spiritually open-minded, and so in need, and like in this like quest for God. I mean, keep in mind, when you found me, I was 26 years old, coming out of a covert satanic cult, having only been on my own for, like 6 years, something like this. I mean, on and off, because college, and then you go back home, and then, whatever. And so it's not a lot of time to really ground who you are yet. And so what they did was they sent hordes of people. Some had been my best friends for 20 years. Some had been strangers. Some had been just very cunning, silver-tongued, kind of smooth talkers, and all different types. And they sent these people to spiritually derail me, and they did often. And so, you see things with past lives with my family, but you also see things like they were throwing prophecy after prophecy at me. This is you now. This is you. And it was all to create a delusion of grandeur. And the tricky part is, when you're like floundering around, I mean, I have to say, Star Wars put me into there's no shadow of a doubt, a complete existential nightmare of what does it all mean? How can I be all this important? Am I important? Am I nothing? And it was just, it's too much. It's way too much for the average person to deal with it. I mean, think about this. One person, imagine this. If you're not sure, imagine a celebrity who yesterday wasn't famous and today is the world famous. But not just world famous, like you know them when they sing. You know everything about them and it's all wrong. They watch you shit. They watch you shower. I mean, it's beyond any kind of hell that a celebrity has known. I'm sorry, but it is. You might have flex. Oh, the paparazzis. And then you get to go into a house. You don't get to know my hell, dude. And you watch, like, I was just putting on, sorry, Mickey Mouse Club again. Britney Spears, you want a piece of me? And I'm like, I fucking get it. Except Britney had money to protect her, had people that really loved her, had a personal assistant, had, and still she has breakdown after breakdown. And I don't blame her that. I get it. But keep in mind, I was Britney without any of the good stuff. So it's fucking sucks, dude. And it was just way too much. So I had countless breakdowns in the beginning. I remember at one point that you guys were throwing. Now keep in mind, I had not researched any of these predictions, prophecies, legends, whatever that they were constantly throwing my way. You don't even understand. And some people even meant well and weren't trying. They were just fans and so in awe. But it affected my psyche when they would come up and be like, never in 500 years and never in 500 more will we see someone like you. I mean, this starts to get to you after a while. And I don't think everyone meant bad by this. It's just, it starts to be like when you don't know what Star Wars is, it starts. I went the spiritual route. I was like, oh, I'm already not very grounded in the red chakra. I'm already in the purple. So, I was like, let's explain it spiritually and not having. You see, I still do it all the time. Not having the tangible grounds to state that Star Wars is fact. I had nothing else but to resort to spiritual, and I got even more entrenched in this. And being totally afraid and totally desperate and totally at odds, all I ever did was turn to God and turn to magic and turn to that which I could control. Make sense? And explain, but it's not to say that the control and explanation are necessarily correct, just to say that the desperation was 100-fold because of what you created. And so I had never researched Nostradamus. What is it? White Buffalo? I never heard of any of these concepts. Then there were like many other prophecies too that I don't even think exist. I'm not even seeing where they're finding this information. And people were coming up to me and saying all these things. Oh, Tara, your name, it's, this and that, Bodhisattva, so nice to meet you, da 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 da. And I think some were real. I think some of them were fans, and some of them were enemies. And then this is just like a whole other shit show. And so, and then you had these religious folk coming to think that I was like the Antichrist. And then you had like, and then I was like the sign of the bad times, and just fucking a shit show. And I didn't research any of those concepts. So I was relying on the people saying that I was a thing to also explain to me what is a thing. And that's why you have strange footage. Like, I understand now Corbin was recording me, and I don't know what the fuck a white buffalo is. I'm a white lady. I'm not on a reservation. But at the time, in coincidence, I was also having a fucking mental breakdown. I was sleeping on the streets, getting rained on, being like, talk about, it's like a why have thou forsaken me complete moment. Being like, how can you forsake me, world? Don't you understand? I don't want to put my friends in danger. I can't stay in their houses. I've lost everything. I don't know who to turn to. The people are watching and nobody's doing anything. I mean, try to conceptualize for a second. The daunting over is way too much. It's still, I mean, it's been 6 years and it's still way too much to think about. And my family, how could you do this to me? How could you come in and steal all my stuff? And my roommate stole my keys, and my sister's calling all my friends and telling them not to help me, and they're lying about me, and like, whoa. And I didn't know my family would be involved. That was a shock to the system. I had no idea that this was going on, no idea what they were involved in at the time. I was defensive of them, and they were stabbing me in the back, all of them in unison, brothers, sisters, parents. I mean, it was a shit show, okay? And I never expected that. I knew they were distant. I didn't know they were like this. And can you imagine your family telling all your friends and family not to help because they're going to, and then they trick them and leave you on the street, okay? Just imagine for a second. And so when I heard concepts not having any explanation, I'd be like, really? And I would hear out each one. But every one that I heard ended up hurting me more than it helped me, and it would lead to overwhelm. And I would just end up crying and be like, it's me, or it's not me, or it's just too much. I don't want to do it. It's too much. I can't handle it. And I think you do have footage of that, them saying white buffalo, this and that, which I'm still not really clear what that means. And me going, if it's me, it's too much, and just freaking out. And it's because I'm already on the verge of a breakdown, and then it's all this now. And it's like my mind wanted a spiritual explanation, and then they're offering all this stuff that's completely derailing. And the problem is that they don't just pick random concepts. They pick concepts like the Nostradamus that does have seeds, kernels of truth or similarity. And my mind wanting an explanation for anything is like, really? And it's like, no. But it did take me I think I'm still in it. I don't think I've ever really gotten out of trying to explain on a spiritual level why, dear God, me. I think I'm still in that. I think that that's just a side effect of Star Wars. And I really don't think that will probably ever end in my life. I think I've become more discerning on what are closer to reality and what have more of a energetic, probability but I still don't claim to know much of anything, because I've seen how in a switch and anything can change, and I can tell you what feels right, what feels nice. And I can tell you this, that and I'm actually probably going to write a thing on this. I've been keep getting that I should be doing that. I think that I've always kind of said it, and no offense, but it's just the way I talk. Christianity is magic for dummies, and you can't really go wrong with it. And you can't go wrong with Christ. You're just not going to go wrong with Christ. I don't believe that. And you're not going to go wrong with God, and you're not going to go wrong with Holy Spirit if you believe those to be things to surrender to, and not things that you overpower or try to control. And it's more just the act of surrendering your will, and that gets you out of the way of yourself, to get you out of your egoic state and into seeing things more objectively, and into a stance more of servitude. And this is already an improvement from the way that we operate. I know for me, like, my scapegoat is like to-do list, like the 1.5 billion things that I want to do on my to-do list, to have a control. But it also makes sense, but it also doesn't, but it also makes sense. And I think I think more than the average person, I need spirituality more than most people. I can't say that I have things, but I can't say I'm more spiritually apt than the average spiritual person. I don't think so, but I do think that my need is greater. And so that creates these times of, phenomena, or what Christians would say supernatural kind of things, but I don't want to use this word because then your mind goes elsewhere, and now we're talking about this and that. But I think that, and then of course you see like ghosts in the household, which I now understand are complete bullshit. And it took me ages to face that, and kind of grow up away from that spiritual abuse. So you see this history of getting spiritually derailed so many fucking times. And I am now at a stance where I couldn't possibly claim to know the way. It's fine if other people want to say that they know the way, or that's the one way. I'm not comfortable to say that because I've been wrong so many times before. But I will say that I'm pretty sure I'll remain a spiritual person for the rest of my life. I was born that way. I will die that way. And I do believe in God. I have come to embrace Christ. It took me a long time. And I do pray to all these things, and have for the past decade. Just Christ with more fervor now, and more actual commitment to that without this. And I still do believe in the power of the human mind, which is magic. And I do believe that there are forces, vibrations, frequencies that people can pick up on, that can stay in pockets, or in people, or in just space. It's just energy is like this, and then it's like that, and there's just, and that's that. Vague, yes, but I don't want to confirm anything. And at the heart of everything, I will always be an existentialist who, instead of being a chaos existentialist, instead will always believe that it doesn't really matter if there's a point to life or not. We are allowed to make it up, even if we're wrong. If we can just acknowledge that, even if we're wrong, that we choose to live saying that everything means something rather than everything doesn't. And that's the only way I survive. And I feel very healthy in that. That is the one thing that has lasted through all of it, is I've always been an existentialist no matter what, and still remain one today. And a sociologist, so understanding certain aspects about religion that, where they might get a little bit more credit than what are really just other things. And but it's more fun this way. What can I say? And I will write a thing on it, because I actually keep getting this for a couple months now to write it down. All these things that are kind of very interesting to me in my mind about this. But I don't know. I see the parallels between what I'm discovering now, and I'm a novice, and I've been there for a decade. But in the parallels to what I was doing before with kind of Wicca and Christianity, I see many more parallels than there are differences. And I know that most sides won't believe that. And I will explain that more later. But I don't think that it's necessarily contradiction at all. And that is a huge revelation for me that I didn't get until probably this year. So that's huge. And so you don't ever ask, well, why did she believe that? Or where did she come up with that notion? Probably I didn't. But that is what is going on. And you never ask questions. You just act like everyone's normal to me, that no one could possibly be derailing me. And I'm like a human, and at the time I was a very, very wounded, very, very vulnerable, very, very scared 26-year-old who'd never asked to be famous, and was just thrust into an absolutely nightmare of a situation, which I still live every day today and will never not say. I will always describe it the same as hell on earth, because that's exactly what Star Wars is, and you don't know it till you've lived it. And even the people that come in for a couple months and I get what that felt like. You always have permission to leave. That's everything in the mind. If I had that, there'd hardly be a problem. I've tried to run to all ends of the world. There's no escaping it.